Hello and welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. My name is Haig, and we have Pastor Nishan Bakalian here to talk to us today about what is happening in Beirut, Lebanon. Pastor Nishan, or Batfli Nishan as we say in Armenian, was my mentor when I was in seminary. We worked together at the Havertown Church in Pennsylvania, the Havertown Armenian Martyrs Congregational Church. Shout out to Havertown. And we have Batfli right now joining us from Lebanon, and for this time to discuss what exactly is going on. So on August 4th, 2020, there was a giant explosion but on the port city of Beirut, a giant explosion that led to close to 200 deaths, close to 7,000 injured, close to $15 billion of property damage. If you haven't seen the explosion, you could see it, but it is very gruesome to watch. So we're going to talk about what's happening after the explosion and in the country of Lebanon. So Batfli, great having you on. It's great to do this with someone I know really well. And just how are you doing, just to start things off?
We're doing okay. It's how are you doing is like the classic question here that people ask or outsiders ask us, and we our starting point is always doing okay, because there's just so much going on, so much is happening, so much has happened and is happening, so much is changing. There's so many difficulties that really the only point of access for anybody for that question is, I'm doing okay. Then we go on to define, well, what is okay? And what is okay is, it's kind of strange for those who live here in Lebanon. Okay, it has a different meaning than people elsewhere. For us, okay is, the electricity didn't get interrupted too often, or they came and collected the trash last night. Yeah, it was the middle of the night and it woke us up, but they collected the trash. The Lebanese pound just fell a little bit in the last day. So, the price that's available on the black market is okay. It's kind of weak, but okay. So okay is, has all of these different aspects to it. And it is just very hard to say to people, well, okay is, really depends on the day and on the situation. There weren't any violent protests, so that's okay. By the way, coffee has just been delivered.
All right. It's Christ and Coffee podcast for a reason.
Christ and Coffee podcast. So thank you. That was my wife, Maria, who is so graciously prepared me an entire ibrik in Arabic, or jezve in Turkish, of coffee. And I don't know if you can see the foam on the top, but that's a sign of great honor. So thank you, great respect. And I am feeling okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, because you got local.
And not only that, but next to the coffee is the lochum and the biscuits. And you squish the lochum, what's known, you'll pardon my French, Turkish delight. You squeeze it between the biscuits. They're just plain biscuits. And it's like this little sandwich, and it's so sweet, and it goes with the bitter coffee so well.
It's so, like a Middle Eastern s'more right there.
Yeah, right. Without the fire.
Yeah, without the bonding and fire.
We've got enough fire. Long answer to a short question. I'm okay.
But everything you just described were things that were taking place before the explosion. What I think people weren't paying attention to before the explosion, that this has been accumulating over time, the economy, the unemployment, the garbage on the streets.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
could you just, are you able to just kind of give a backdrop of how Lebanon got to this place before we jump into like what happened when the explosion hit?
This will be just sort of like the most recent period. I can talk a little bit about that because there is so much more that you need to understand to understand a little bit about Lebanon and what it is and how it is, where it is. But in recent years, there's been a sort of a power struggle, and the basic power struggle is between East and West. So there are those in Lebanon that want to look to the West, to Europe and the US and all of that, that whole world. And those who want to look eastward to, say, Russia and Iran and now China. And so there's been a struggle for, I would say, the most intense has been like the last dozen years. So what that leads to is paralyzed governments. And this government paralysis has just accentuated problems that are already systemic in the whole Lebanese power structure. So if somebody is leading the government who leans too much one way or leans too much the other way, it's mostly been the one way that's had the protests. Protests come out, and those protests they result in, let's say, people pitching tents around government offices, or having these mass protests around government offices, or blocking roads, burning tires, preventing people getting to their jobs or getting to their homes. And part of that protest, of course, is extremely legitimate, that a government should not, after 30 years after civil war has ended, 1990, the government should not still be thinking about how do I get 24-hour, 7-day-a-week electricity to homes? How do I have a proper solid waste management, or even wastewater management, or freshwater management, et cetera? How do I get it so that the country has puts its efforts into developing jobs so that young people, because the average age here is younger than a lot of other countries, so that young people will not be continually seeking employment elsewhere in the Arab Gulf, in Europe, or wherever, or working in other countries and commuting here, like having their work life in the Gulf region and having their social life and family life here in Lebanon. How do I do that? And you would expect governments to do this, but there's so much struggle between these poles, it's polarized, that none of this ever gets done. So fast forward to last October, the government, which of course also has this huge corruption problem, the government was saying, well, gee, we need money. So how are we going to get money? Oh, let's tax our citizens some more. So what they figured was, citizens are using their cell phones and the internet for free international calling and free local calling. All they need is a hotspot. So let's tax every minute that they use those things, such as WhatsApp or other voice over internet protocol systems. Let's put a tax on that. And that was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. So last October 17, these massive protests erupted, and people had just had enough, especially young people, but not exclusively, and not one religious group, because religious groupings are really important here in Lebanon. Everything is formulated around that. They exploded in these protests all over the country, and people closed roads and they burned tires, and they had these massive gatherings in the center of the city. And they said, this is just too much. It's too far. We don't have anything anyway, and you're taking this one thing that we're able to do, and you want to add a tax onto that. And after a few days, the government said, well, we're suspending that decision. And then after a few more days, the prime minister resigned. And then there was this protracted period of protests from let's say November, December, until early January, when they were able to come up with a candidate for a prime minister. The government resigned means the prime minister resigned and his cabinet. So they came up with a new prime minister in January, and he was supposed to be gathering specialists in the cabinet instead of people who belong to a certain religious community and have certain political connections, because that's usually how the cabinet is formed,
Right.
not on the basis of ability. And they then did that, and then the whole coronavirus thing came on top of what the government, this new government, was trying to do. And then this explosion happened in August, and the prime minister that started in January resigned, and his cabinet is now in a caretaker position. So that's kind of the last 11 months in a nutshell, a very bitter nutshell.
That was well done. It helped frame the narrative for me, and I've been following it, but it's good to just hear it just in one kind of breath like you just did. So right now there's no prime minister.
It's a caretaker prime minister.
So
we have a president. President hasn't stepped down at all. There's a prime minister, and that's the one that changed a couple of times in the last year. And there's a new prime minister designate that was just announced yesterday. And there's the parliament and the speaker of parliament, who hasn't changed in like 35 years.
Wow. So there's instability in government. There's electricity problems. So like I remember a couple of times when we were trying to connect, you said I only have a couple of hours today for internet for electricity. Yeah. Is that still going on? What is that like? Because I know when people here don't have internet, that they start like freaking out, sweating, and they have like missing limbs syndrome happening, and everything is just, all hell breaks loose when there's no internet or electricity these days.
Oh, that's funny. Well, sorry, we're a little jumpy here. My Bible just fell off my desk, and it is a loud sound, and we get. Sorry, this is part of How Are You? When there's a loud sound of any kind, it makes us jump. And so just like we still have the after effects of, there was you could call it a war between Islamist groups in 2007 and the Lebanese government. And this was mostly in the north of Lebanon. And so the government was fighting with helicopter gunships. And so until this day, when helicopters pass overhead, we get a little bit anxious. Maria and I both get a little bit nervous, and we don't like the sound of helicopters. But that's like the only way, that's what the Lebanese Air Force uses, or Army uses. So anyway, sorry about loud sounds.
No.
Okay, so going back to what the situation, like the electricity situation, for example, really strange. July, we had probably the worst July we have ever experienced, because there was almost no electricity. There was maybe 2 to 4 hours of electricity per day. I'll repeat that for your listeners. 2 to 4 hours of electricity per day. That means 20 to 22 hours of no electricity per day. Now, over the years, again, this is going back to the mismanagement and corruption in the country, the electricity sector not being straightened out led to the rise of like private generator operators who supply private electricity to their neighborhoods, and you pay per kilowatt hour or whatever. That meant that those generators were working a lot more to supply electricity for the downtimes for the government electricity, except during the night. And in July, it's very hot and very humid in Beirut. So the month of July, basically, we didn't sleep at all. because it was impossible to sleep with still humid, hot air. And then the explosion happened. And I want to say coincidentally, we started getting almost 24/7 electricity.
So you got better electricity after the explosion.
Yeah.
But now you don't have any
Lebanese.
windows or doors, and there's so much noise coming from the streets. You still can't get sleep though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, tell me about it. All you hear all night is plastic going this way and that way, plastic going this way. And because there's a curfew, because the government is trying to hold down the infection rate of coronavirus, they set a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There's not supposed to be anybody on the streets, although there's the occasional motor scooter or car that zooms up and down our street, because our street is right next to one of the government hospitals. Actually, one that was damaged and had to close because of the explosion, but there's still traffic there. So very quiet nights, except for the sound of plastic coming and going. And if you've ever tried it, it's really hard to sleep when somebody is manipulating a plastic bag in your bedroom. I would not suggest trying it, but it is very hard.
I don't want to try it. Wow.
Good.
So electricity has at least gotten better, but now you're dealing with this explosion. So where were you when you heard this just explosion? They're saying there hasn't been an explosion this big since World War II, when America dropped nuclear bombs on Japan. Is that correct? This is the magnitude of the explosion.
No, actually, it's what they're calling it is one of the largest non-nuclear explosions, and it's not at the top. But if you were here on that day, it was 6:08 p.m. on August 4th, Tuesday, August 4th. So. We're talking about basically a month ago. It's almost indescribable, but it's very interesting that practically everybody felt the same thing. We weren't at home, and I want to show you an aerial photograph of Beirut, just so you get a sense of where the explosion happened, where we live, where our home is, and where we were that day. But our home is about 1 kilometer away from the port of Beirut, where the explosion happened. We were at a place that was about twice as far as that. So say 2.5 kilometers away. So let's say roughly over a mile. Let's call it 1.5 miles from the explosion. We were visiting Haigazian University, where Maria works, and where I used to work. I used to be the campus minister there. We were visiting the president and his family, the Haidostians, and our son Sevag was here visiting us from the United States. He comes every summer. He's crazy. He comes every summer, spends a month here, serves with our children's camp, visits his friends, has time with us. It's great. But anyway, it was a couple of days before he was supposed to leave. So we went and visited them. And because of our trying to keep social distancing rules, we met on the patio of one of the buildings on the campus. And there were a couple of tables there, and we had our masks, and we're having coffee and pastry and just sort of visiting with their family and our family. And then I felt an earthquake, which makes sense because the Middle East is on a fault line. It runs down into Africa. It's why you have the Red Sea and all that stuff. I mean, and why you have the Lebanon mountain range running north to south. So earthquakes are not unheard of in Lebanon. And I felt, because the ground was rolling, and I lived 8 years in San Francisco, so I know what an earthquake feels like. So the ground was rolling, and I said, it's okay, it's an earthquake. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the first explosion of this cache of ammonium nitrate. And only a few seconds later, they say it was 12 seconds later, there was wind, there was a boom, and there was dust, and there was wind, and there was flying glass everywhere. And we didn't know what to think. And because people always expect there to be some sort of attack on Lebanon, or an assassination in Lebanon, or some civil unrest, or some problem somewhere. This is the default expectation of people, and also one of the things that they're very, very tired of. And one of the main reasons why young people just want to leave. Anyway, so we were there, and that second explosion happened, and glass flew out of the windows, and the building we were sitting in front of is one of the old heritage buildings. It's a very beautiful, classic bit of art, Ottoman period architecture, and so window frames were broken, glass was broken. There's brand new buildings across the street. Those big plate glass windows were, a lot of them were broken. And once that powerful wind subsided, we looked around. We sort of retreated inside. We looked around outside, and we saw that people are on their balconies, and some of them were looking this way, and some of them were looking that way, and some of them looking down this street, the street that Haigazian is on, Rue Mexique, where Haigazian is located. And we figured we would know what happened where based on where people are looking, but they were looking every which way. Afterwards, when we heard other people's stories and we were sharing our stories, everyone told the same story. We thought it was an earthquake. Then there was this huge explosion. We said the explosion has happened in the street next to us. Everybody in the affected area, which is probably like they say 2.6 mile radius, kilometer radius. So let's say a 1.5 1.75 mile radius with the most severely affected area. Everyone told the same story. They said it happened right next to us. Wow. It was that big an explosion that you didn't hear, it didn't sound like, oh, this happened way far away. Like, for example, in 2005, when the former Prime Minister, Rafik Hariri, was assassinated, we were again in the same building. Maybe there's some like bad, sorry. Okay. So we were in the same building when that explosion happened. We could tell that it happened in that direction. It was right. A massive explosion, but this one, we couldn't tell where it had come from. Well, I guess, the people said that the force of the blast created this circular wind. And so just knocked things out in this circular pattern. It didn't go in one direction, but in all directions. And so once the reports started coming in, first they said, some fireworks have exploded. And we thought, that's interesting. And then little by little, it became clearer. It's still not clear, but it became clearer. They talked about an emergency order being given to secure this warehouse where all the ammonium nitrate was. The shipment that had come into the port of Beirut in 2013 was 2,750 tons. Sorry, kilograms.
Oh, kilograms. Okay.
Tons. It was tons. Sorry.
Okay.
It was tons of ammonium nitrate. Since then, some experts, hasn't really been talked about too much openly, have said there's no way that much exploded, because there would be no Beirut today if that much had exploded. But it was more like, let's say, 1/10 of that, which leads one to think what happened to the rest of it. And that is one of the questions that any investigation, any legitimate investigation, is going to have to answer. What happened to the rest of it? I mean, even with this force of blast, and explosions experts are saying this is the radius of this much ammonium nitrate. And also they're saying that it's not the welding that ignited it, because you need an igniter to ignite it. So these are things experts are saying. I'm not an expert. But this was our experience and sort of what was going through our minds that day.
So are people thinking that this is a freak accident, or a lot of people are just a whole bunch of theories are emerging on the grounds?
Yeah, there's a couple of theories. I think probably the most legitimate one is this is the result of massive mismanagement and corruption.
Because this nitrate, which is sitting there for how many years?
Sitting there since 2013.
Wow, 7 years.
Since 2013,
this explosive
so 7
material
years
was just on the docks.
Is sitting in the port. Yeah, sitting in the port in a warehouse. And as you've seen the photos, right next to the grain silos, which supplied, I think, 80% of the wheat for Lebanon, and they were very solidly built in the 1960s, the late 60s, very, very solidly built. And because it was so solidly built, the direction of the blast in that direction was greatly minimized because these silos absorbed the blast. Half of it is still standing, half of it is collapsed. And a large amount of the blast went onto the Mediterranean, which is why people in Cyprus really felt this blast very strongly.
Wow.
And they saw it actually on the horizon. But the other half circle, of course, went to the city of Beirut, and in particular to the areas of these old neighborhoods, these old heritage houses, where a lot of the old Lebanese, established Lebanese families had their estates along this route, and also many, many Armenian families in this same route. As a matter of fact, the identifying streets where all this happened are Pasteur Street, Louis Pasteur Street, Gemezi Street, and Armenia Street. The street that goes from approximately where the port starts all the way to Burj Hamud, which is, of course, a major Armenian enclave. And there are so many Armenians that live along this route. And so the Armenian community in particular, not exclusively, but in particular, is one of the communities was very badly hit by this event.
Wow. Are you noticing a lot of Armenians picking up and trying to leave, or they're sticking around and we're going to stick through this and rebuild, or it's too early to tell?
Well, it is a little bit on the early side, but let me say that there has already been a trend of Lebanon is not addressing these problems. Protests happened, but nothing changed. The same political establishment, the entrenched political establishment, is still entrenched. So there was already a movement elsewhere. We would always hope that if people are going to pick up and move, they would go to Armenia, but that's not always the case. But there was already that flow going. This explosion happened, and the reaction of the government, or rather let's say the lack of active identification with the victims of this, and we're talking about probably 400,000 people affected by this blast. That was infuriating, and the day or two, well, the day after, everyone was in shock. The day after that, and the day after that, protests resumed. They had kind of died out because everyone was supposed to keep social distancing. You're not supposed to gather in large groups, et cetera, et cetera. And the protests, that's another issue, because it's not purely one type of protest that was happening, but the protests just inflamed against the government and against the governmental section of the city, which is basically a ghost town guarded by soldiers, because and surrounded by barbed wire because of this government, this government which does not do its job. So these protests were met by live fire from security forces. Not tear gas. Well, yes, tear gas, rubber bullets aimed right at them, which is against international law, and live fire. And so the protests were very quickly squashed a few days after the explosion.
Wow.
So people were not even allowed to express their rage. And so now, it's not that the government or the army was absent, but they were just not visible. They were not organized. People in those neighborhoods and people from around Beirut and around Lebanon descended on, oops, our electricity just went. Okay, you're still with me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, we've got a power supply on our Wi-Fi, so it doesn't cut off when the electricity goes out. So anyway, our building's generator will fire up now, pouring more pollutants into the air, which is just what we need.
Right. But we get to keep this conversation live and going.
Oh yeah.
So there it is. Let there be
the generator,
power generators.
The generator kicked that in. Yeah, back in. So so all of these citizens, Lebanese citizens, descended upon that area, Mar Mikhael, Gemezi, these areas that were most badly hit, bringing brooms, bringing shovels, and they themselves started the cleanup and the rescue work as much as they could. The country, I mean, for a disaster of this size, I think any country would be reeling from the impact and really unable to do what it could in the first hours. But before long, there would be heavy equipment, there would be rescue teams, they would just be coming. But the government was at the point where they were trying to grant particular countries permission to come and do rescue work, and others, they were denying other countries. For example, Armenia wanted to send a rescue team. They said, well, you don't have the right equipment, so we don't want your rescue team. The Czech Republic, I think, also had a rescue team that was prevented from leaving the airport for, I think, 24 hours, or leaving their country. I'm not sure which, because the government was not sure whether they wanted this team from the Czech Republic to come. I mean, it was such a massive disaster. They needed all the help that they could, yet they were still trying to figure out, well, who should come and who shouldn't. And this, of course, it enrages people and discourages people. And you were asking about outflow from Lebanon. I mean, I was just reading an article from one of the local papers from yesterday that was saying it's time to leave and not look back.
Wow.
So, yeah. Oops. Anyway, we'll just keep talking.
Yeah.
I think the generator quit. So our generator's been having problems. It's a new generator, so it has problems.
Of course, the brand new ones always cause the most problems.
Yeah. So I'll just have a sip of coffee here.
So how are you doing, Bakalian?
Yeah, so it's okay. It's okay. Life is good. I'm still alive. And that's kind of been the measure that people are saying. Well, I didn't get physically injured, or I only had some injuries. So many people have talked about, and of course, when you're alive, you can talk about this stuff. If you're dead or in a hospital fighting for your life, you can't talk about the step that you shouldn't have taken that you did. But so many people are talking about, well, at that moment, I wanted to get something out of the fridge. I went and opened the door, and the fridge door took all the glass that my body would have taken. Or I was on the balcony, and there was something inside that was happening, and I had to get up from the balcony. I went inside, and that's when the blast happened, because people were blown off of their balconies to their deaths.
Wow.
I mean, this is not a joke. The force of this blast, I mean, the injuries that people have described, I don't want to talk about, but the injuries that people have described are inhuman. And the protests that were happening were talking about the inhumanity of what happened. That how can you as a government know what was going on, know that there was this, and say, as the president of Lebanon did, I gave a warning I gave a warning to the port this many months ago, but the port is not my jurisdiction. Oh, really?
We really don't need a "I told you so" moment right now. We kind of
really,
or shift blaming.
The prime minister was told there's a very serious security situation, and was told this in June or July, and he was going to send a special detail to go and inspect whatever this was, and was told, oh, it's just fertilizer. Okay, we know ammonium nitrate is used, among other things, for fertilization. Oh, it's just fertilizer, and canceled that security detail. Okay, who told him what the situation was? Who canceled it? Who said what to whom? All of these questions have to be part of this investigation. And I didn't get to a huge part of what has been happening in the past almost 1 year, and actually beyond that. But one of the basic things that the Lebanese have experienced in this latest event, which they're saying is unlike anything that has happened before, is there is no longer any confidence in any institution in society. There is no longer any confidence anywhere. So the part of that whole scenario that I described for you that was so convenient, there's one part that really makes it inconvenient, and that is the problems in the banking sector. There's the economic situation in the country is really probably the biggest driver of people despairing of staying in Lebanon and leaving for other countries.
So it's not COVID, it's not the explosion, it's not the political corruption, it's the dollar.
The economy. It's the economy.
How much is the Lebanese currency right now, and how did it get there?
Oh, okay. The Lebanese currency.
Put it in perspective for the listeners.
Okay. Yeah, sure thing. The Lebanese currency was very unstable at the end of the Civil War in 1990. But there was a decision made to link Lebanese currency to the US dollar. And so in 91 or 92, maybe 92 or 93, they fixed the Lebanese currency to the US dollar so that 1,500 lira would equal $1. And from 92, 93 until last October, it stayed at 1,500 lira to the dollar. What also developed in that time was something that an economist I heard a couple of days ago say he's only seen happen in Argentina, and we know how great the Argentinian economy is, that US dollars and Lebanese pounds were used interchangeably. So you go into a store, sorry, I only have dollars, that's okay. And the shopkeeper will take the dollar and will charge whatever the value is in dollars. It was a even exchange, no difference. You want to pay in Lebanese, you want to pay in dollars, no problem, no problem. To the point where any ATM in the country, any bank, dispensed US dollars or Lebanese pounds. And so that's the first question it asks after your passcode is dollars or Lebanese currency. Well, that's no longer the case, because once the protests started and the protests turned against the Lebanese banking system because it was becoming more and more restrictive of just regular people and more accommodating to the rich, those rich Lebanese who were, for the past several years, able to transfer their money out of Lebanon. And even after banks supposedly prevented these transfers out of Lebanon. They began to turn against the banks, and so the protests against the banks, and they destroyed bank facades and trashed ATMs and attacked the Association of Banks in Lebanon. The banks are saying, this is not our problem. This is the way that this or that is happening. And so there's all of this, well, I'm not doing it. Yes, there's a problem, but I'm not causing it. It's this that's causing it, or it's that that's causing it. The central bank is causing it. No, the private banks are causing it. No, the Western governments are blockading Lebanon, which is true, especially the United States. But that, I need to get into a history lesson to be able to tell you the connection that the West has with the problems of Lebanon today. But the economy has really, the falling of the economy, or the free falling of the economy, has caused all of this hopelessness to increase. And it's really a spiritual struggle. It's a struggle in people's hearts. It's a struggle with any country which doesn't have trust in each other, in its leadership, in its institutions. That society is in big trouble, and that's why we're in big trouble here, because that trust is gone. And the trust, for example, in the banking sector, it will take years and years, and a systemic change for any of that to change in people's minds. People might stay and say, we'll tough this one out too. We've seen banners in the affected areas, in the blast area, that say in English and Arabic, "We are staying."
Wow.
But it's as much a message to the person hanging the banner as it is to those observing and taking pictures for their foreign news agencies.
They're working on the generator.
Yeah, they're working on the generator.
Got it. Is your cell phone battery good though?
Yeah, cell phone battery. Yeah, I think I've been charging it the whole time we've been talking, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
I think we're okay with that.
I love having the illustrations. We talked about electricity, and we're experiencing it right now.
As long as I have my coffee, I don't care if there are lights on or not, or if the AC switches on and switches off. There are certain priorities in life. So I think I got my priorities straight here. I've got my coffee, and it's Arabic coffee. So
yeah,
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that you're drinking. You're drinking it out of a straw.
Yeah.
So it can't be right.
It's not. Right. It's typical New York. New York is known for its iced coffee. So I just put
my
into coffee.
My wife is saying, "Oh, what I'd give for a cold coffee."
What I would give for an Arabic coffee right now.
Right. Eventually, the technology will get there so that we can hand each other our coffees through the screen.
Yes.
I hope not. I
don't know if that'll be healthy to drink if when the technology doesn't.
So
work.
Yeah, right. So actually, one of the just down the street from us, they're refurbishing an old building, and they built about 6 floors above it. This is one of the new trends in the construction in this area. This, unfortunately, now this ground zero area is taking old buildings, and instead of doing what they did with downtown, which is knock down the whole downtown and basically ruin any character that the downtown area had, they're taking these old buildings, gutting them, and then building the new buildings, the tall buildings inside them, and as skyscrapers, or sometimes medium-rise buildings, like the one down the street. The reason I mentioned it is because they're planning to open a Starbucks on the ground level.
Great. Is there a lot of Starbucks?
I don't know if that's progress. I don't know if that's progress, but that's what they're planning to do. And of course, there's graffiti on the Starbucks, accepting applications now. There's graffiti saying support local coffee shops.
Right.
So,
yeah. No, there's a lot to talk about when you talk about Starbucks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've got our priorities straight. We've got our Arabic coffee. We don't blink an eye when the electricity goes and comes and goes and comes. We sweat through the night, and then are amazed at the miracle of a disaster happening, fixing the electricity. I mean, what just happened has not really happened since the blast. It's been almost uninterrupted, maybe like a 3-hour power cut a day. And it's like a miracle. And one of my very, very, very bad jokes, I mean, bad in the sense of, as we say in Armenian, if you're going to open your mouth, say something good jokes. I wonder how many more disasters we need to get everything else in Lebanon fixed. You see, my wife just said, "Oh, be quiet." But you know, if a blast like this fixed the electricity, it's like maybe. Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some positive spins, right? Like, I feel like money is now coming in from different parts of the world. There's a sense of rebuilding the city together, regardless of the backgrounds. People are literally picking up the brooms and cleaning the streets instead of trying to wait for the government. Let's just start cleaning the streets.
Exactly. That sort of civil initiative really has been one of the bright spots in all of this. From the very first hours, when people, it did not matter who is in need. If you're able to help, you helped.
Great.
And of course, what it also meant was that these non-Lebanese were also a very important part of this rescue. There are so many Syrians here who were right in there. This is their place. You know, they're here as refugees or as guest workers. They were working. So many foreign nationals who were here as you know, common laborers. You know, people from Ethiopia, people from Sri Lanka, people from all sorts of places in Africa or South Asia, who are here, some of whom lost their lives, many of whom were involved in this cleanup. And it's like everybody, whereas before, you know, if they're Africans or South Asians, they're probably sanitation workers, because Lebanese generally don't work in sanitation work unless they're management. But no, it was everybody. And so it created that solidarity. And then what happened was these NGOs came in, and foreign governments came in and they said, you know, we're going to give our money to these NGOs, and either also to the NGOs or in place of what we would give to a government, we're giving to these NGOs. And of course, the hope is always that these NGOs will all be honest and above board. We know that where there's money, there's abuse. That always happens, but you take it as part of humanity and part of what happens in situations like this. You can't account for everything, but enough good is happening that you say, okay, let's just keep at it. Let's just keep doing this. So we're in such a central place. Right down the street from us is what used to be a train station back when Lebanon had trains, a train station which is now partially used as a bus station and partly as they rent it out for like Christmas fairs and stuff like that. Well, in that train station, Mar Mikhail, they have set up, all of these NGOs have set up different tables or different tents where you can go, you sign up as a volunteer, or you sign up, you say, I need this, or you say, I can help in this way, or I can work, I can do delivery if somebody needs food delivered, somebody needs other items delivered, sanitary items or whatever delivered, I can do that. I have stuff that I bought like 50 cartons of toilet paper here. Take it and give it to where it's needed. And so they've set it up so that they're able to organize all of that, organize volunteers, and get them where they need to go. Or if people need to call and say, I need somebody to help me do this. I still have glass all over my apartment. Can somebody come and help me clean up? And they'll send crews with brooms and with trash bags and with gloves. And so this is like people to people help. It's the place where, like one of the first places where the American envoy to Lebanon visited when he came here shortly after the blast. It's where other foreign leaders have come and visited. And it's, they're doing recycling, which is something the Lebanese government has never undertaken. They're doing glass, aluminum, metal, plastic recycling. And so hopefully as an outcome, some of these things will stick.
Right.
And maybe it won't be a government project. Maybe it'll be a private initiative. But some of these things will stick because people want to do what they can. But in talking with, and here I'm talking especially about the thing closest to my heart, which is the Lebanese Armenian youth. There is still that despair that things will ever get better. They say, I was born in a war. I grew up in a war. I was hoping that things would get better. They got worse. I graduated from college or from university. I've been looking for a job for 2 years. I have to leave. And this is what pains me the most. Because it's something it's not entirely in your control. It's not something you can fault anybody for. You can't force somebody to have hope. You can't, especially when their hope has been dashed again and again and again. And we're talking about people from people in their 40s to people who are just graduated from university. Or we're talking about people who haven't yet gone to university and say, I'm going to look for a university somewhere else. And for the Lebanese Armenian, the most open pathway is to go to university in Armenia. Wow. It's not that far away. It's an hour-and-a-half flight away. It's close enough that they can come back and visit their families from time to time. But this is, we haven't talked about this, but the importance of the Lebanese Armenian community cannot be understated. It cannot be understated. It's, if anyone in any diaspora community just looks around and sees how the diaspora communities are driven by emigres from the Middle East, that's proof enough of the importance of the community here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my wife was born in Beirut. My parents are from there. This is literally close to my home personally. And of course, I mean, there's this intellectual capital, this ability, some of the best food in the world, if not the best food in the world. A lot of culture, civilization that can't be lost because of lack of hope or incompetence. And Arabic coffee I actually went to a Yemeni store the other day and I asked for Arabic coffee and they got offended and they said, this is Yemeni coffee. I was like, okay. It's like Armenians with Turkish coffee.
No. Wait a minute.
It's different.
It's Yemeni coffee. You have to bow your head and bow before their truth because it is the truth. This coffee we're all enjoying originated in Yemen.
Yeah.
So I would accept that. What I would not accept is what I hear all the time in Lebanon. I say, I'd like Arabic coffee. They say Turkish. Because that's what they call Arabic coffee here in Lebanon is Turkish. Uh-huh. And sometimes if the person knows enough English, because my Arabic is pretty bad, I say, I mean Arabic. If you want to call it Lebanese coffee, I'll go along with that.
Yeah.
But not Turkish.
Yeah. So
anyway, but before we get any further, I want to just give you this perspective. It's not a great perspective, but this is an aerial shot of Beirut, and this is where we are right here, and this is where the blast happened, and this is where we were when the blast happened at Haigazian University. So this line here is what separated West Beirut from East Beirut during the Civil War, 1975 to 1990. So we're in what used to be called East Beirut, and just beyond us is Burj Hamud, which is sort of the Armenian enclave. It was where the Armenian refugee camps were after the genocide. We're all in this area along the port. And so this is like the southward direction. That's the airport. And yeah, anyway, so just to give you a perspective.
So how much of the city got collateral damage with their doors being blown off, their windows being shattered, their cars being destroyed?
Okay, so here's the blast. Okay, so if we can go from here, include Burj Hamud because there was a lot of damage there, and we can go here almost to the let's say this downtown area, which looks like an abandoned area, and that's because of the things that happened post-war, post-1990. But this swath of the city is what was very badly damaged right here. So here, like I was saying, how windows blew out in the university and so forth. This far away, which is twice as far away, was also pretty heavily damaged. And the shutters in front of businesses and homes were ripped off. So there's also fairly heavy damage in this much of a radius.
Wow.
Okay.
So
the heaviest damage was here, but let's say beyond this, it was felt at the airport, but really there wasn't a lot of damage. Ceiling tiles had fallen and things like that because of the force of the blast. But the heaviest damage was, like, I would say half the city was severely to moderately damaged.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's it's one of those things that, like, yeah, it's an historic event. We're living history. I realize all of that, but boy, it's really hard. It's really hard to go through it, and it's hard to see how others are going through it. And people who have fought so hard, especially younger people, like younger professionals, have fought so hard to preserve Beirut's heritage, and especially with these heritage houses. The tall high rises that got very badly damaged, you say, oh, it's okay, it's just a new building. But these heritage houses, which are irreplaceable and have been preserved with such care, and people coming and giving their all. And I also speak as a Christian, because sometimes there's this attitude that Christians can have, and they can say, well, it doesn't matter because what matters is eternal life. I don't think that's what Jesus taught. When Jesus got so burned up at the hypocrisy of leaders that he pronounced, woe are you when you do this, when you call good bad and you call bad good, when you exchange truth for falsehood, woe are you. And then it's followed by him crying. Okay? He gives all these woes, and it's just so powerful to him also. He's crying over an earthly city.
Right.
Why is he crying over if all that matters is heaven, why is he crying over an earthly? I mean, he should just, he should just say, well, all this is going to pass away anyway, so too bad. And I know the secret, and I know that, well, actually, I don't know the time. The Father knows the time. So, no, he went through that, and he identified with the sorrow and the suffering that was caused by people who were not doing the job that they should have as earthly leaders. This is something the Bible talks about when it talks about shepherds. That reference to shepherds is not to spiritual leaders. We spiritualize it. But that reference is always to those who were responsible for the people.
Right.
And woe to the shepherds in Ezekiel. Woe to the shepherds who all they think about is feeding themselves, and all they look at, what are the fattest sheep that I can benefit from? Well, this pretty fairly describes the entrenched leadership here.
Yeah.
It does a fairly good job of describing them. And so the pain that you feel for the people, and you pray that prayer, God, remember the people. I'm not praying for the leaders, although I know I have to pray for them. And the only reason I'm praying for them is because you said pray for your leaders in the Bible. But my heartfelt prayers for the people, be with the people, save the people, give them hope, give them encouragement. And that's some of the, let's say, more heartfelt, maybe less upbeat things that we're feeling in these days.
Yeah. I can't imagine. What the suffering is on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
But I do know, like you said, like the goal of Christianity is not to escape this earth and to go to heaven. It's for heaven to invade earth and redeem the brokenness.
Yeah.
So I think we need to not just pray for leaders, but pray for the redemption of the suffering you are undertaking as a people.
Yeah.
And somehow there will be resurrection life coming from the devastation. And we have to have the hope, not in the government, but in God, who can redeem and will. Whether it's
exactly.
And just to like conclude, what are ways that people who are listening right now could help? Like, what are some ways people could support you guys? Just be of a help versus just listening to the news. What action can we take, especially as the church?
Yeah. I think it's very important to make sure that you have contacts with actual human beings that you know, so that you have a sense of how people are doing and not rely on news reports, because there's always more to things than what can be packaged and broadcast. Even if it's let's say a personal, like there's this person who posted this video, there's this person who really, becomes a very individualistic perspective. But you want to be able to look at the larger picture and the difficulties that are being faced, as well as the particulars of people that you know of, or people around you who know people who are actually on the ground. And to every time you hear something about Lebanon, to make sure the first thing you do is you say, "Dear Lord, help them." You pray to make every moment that Lebanon invades your consciousness as a moment of prayer. Sometimes people feel that, okay, if only I could come and help. I read an amazing poem by the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran. The poem is called "Dead Are My People." And he wrote this poem during the famine of Lebanon in 1915 to 1918, when the West was blockading Lebanon because they wanted to put pressure on the Ottoman Empire. So no goods were flowing in and out of Lebanon, so trade stopped. On the other side of Lebanon was the Ottoman army, Jamal Pasha leading the Ottoman army, who was in control of all of the food, the grain supply to Lebanon. And so half of the population of Lebanon, in between this army and these armies, died.
Wow.
Half of the population. And so Khalil Gibran was living in the US at that time, and he was torn to pieces when he wrote this poem, "Dead Are My People." I mean, it's such a moving poem. And one of the things he said was, "My tears are worth nothing when I am here and they are dying there." Okay, so he felt that sense that I have to do something. And he concluded the poem very, very interestingly. He said, "The only connection between your rich pockets and your God is that coin that you throw for the dying Lebanese." So he was pushing people to say, okay, it may not be much. It may not be much in the terms of the suffering of the world, but give what you can. And that might be another call to people, especially to the church. Give what you can. Again, just as I said, learn what you can from people you know personally. Give what you can to organizations you know personally that have proper accounting, accountability, not just any organization, because so many of them are popping up and people are doing these private fundraising and crowdfunding and so forth, which I guess it's okay if you know the people involved, but give where you know you can trust the groups that are doing that work, and pray and pray and pray.
Pray, connect, and give.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Batfle Nishan, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you for giving me this time. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's just good catching up as well. And thanks for this wisdom and kind of putting everything in perspective. I look forward to future conversations, not just in person, but also over this podcast. So
okay.
It'll be great. So
thanks.
Thank you everyone for listening. Pray, connect, and give, and stay caffeinated. And I hope this was a caffeine boost to your soul, and to raise awareness to you of what's really happening in Lebanon right now. So thank you for watching. Take care, and God bless.